The number one thing that dungeon masters, me, and other people tend to find interesting about talking to other dungeon and game masters is prep. What do you do to prep? How do you prep? What's your method and that kind of thing? And I've done a few videos where I prep for games in the past, and my prep method differs depending on my mood, depending on what I'm feeling like. The other day I was talking to Morgan Grover, the Coffee Bean GM, who is a genius, and his method of prep is one that I have sort of been doing similarly, but I was looking at his custom system Drop Dead, and essentially it had an introduction and then 3 acts, and each act pretty much had just a brief description and then a list of potential things that they could find, and that was the entirety of the information. So this one was a Nazi zombie game that we were looking at, and it was literally it would say, they walk in scene 1 or act 1, the zombies on the table, there's some zombies sitting in a chair who get up when they enter the room, and so it was just describing things that the players could interact with. There was no information for him on how to interact with that or what to do, because he had it in his head. Now, Drop Dead is a completely narrative system and doesn't really do stats, so that kind of lent itself a bit better to it, probably. However, I have often found myself doing fairly similar things in 5e. I think I've refined it to a way I like to prep, which is a very minimalist way, and it won't work for everyone. New dungeon masters, every new game master in the entire world doesn't think they've done enough prep, because they don't realise, well, I mean, maybe if you've watched loads of advice videos before you start or something, but they don't realise that you need to do less prep than you think, because most of the role is just BSing your way through. Most dungeon masters don't really realise that they're prepping for the session constantly, because they're thinking, this is what I'd like to happen in the session. And then by the time it gets to writing out, I find anyway, and some people I've spoken to find that it just tends to be putting your thoughts on paper that are already in your head, and you can just type it straight out. So, on to my specific method of prep, which kind of follows that. My specific method of prep is half of a page of A5. Specifically, this half. This half is initiative from the session, and here's some just names and things that I wrote down that I came up with on the fly. So, obviously, that was probably hard to read. I mean, I guess you could go back and pause it if you really wanted to, but let me just explain what's going on here. So this is the introduction. The hardest part for me is getting my players into it and getting myself into the zone of the game. So I'll go a little bit more in depth into the introduction to ensure that the game starts off at the right tone and in the right way. Also, the opening scene, especially for this game, there were some very specific outcomes and things that could happen. So the game ended last time on a cliffhanger, in which the crew of the Red Moth had just been cornered by a space captain, or a Corsair captain. And so this scene picked up immediately after that. He was flanked by 2 thugs. So the first thing is, Corsair captain flanked by thugs. So that I could essentially make sure that I remembered how many actual pirates and enemies, potentially, that they could be facing. I have the words, "we are at an impasse," written down, because that's a phrase that's kind of the first thing that the pirate captain would say, so I wanted to, just to get myself into it, a little mental reminder, not writing, a script for him, just writing, that's what he'd say. I've written that his goal is to take the orb that they've been trying to look for. That's his sole kind of intention, is to take this item. And then I've put maybe incarceration as a possible outcome, because essentially what I thought the party would do is attack, which they did, and try and dupe him, which they also did. And so I was thinking, potentially, if, the way negotiations go, maybe the pirates capture them, because that was my goal for the session, is to end with the group in a in a situation where they're incarcerated, because I really want to do a breakout scene where they start on a spaceship and they've got to get to their ship that's somewhere inside this bigger spaceship, and just do a sort of great escape type thing, which is the next session. So, under that, I have the more important part, which is potential scenes. So this is a list of things that, depending on how I feel, what I'm, the way it goes, and what might happen, potential things that could happen in the game. So I have here distress signal, spider caterpillars, which I later dubbed space grubs. And that happened in the game. So the party managed to escape kind of scot-free, completely free and clear. So I was like, okay, first thing is they receive a distress signal from someone, and they go and they're attacked by a giant space caterpillar spider thing. That's fair enough. Other potential scenes were a Kreth ship, which, if you remember Tinlaw's prequel, is the kind of hidden evil monsters that are all around the galaxy. I have incarceration and escape. So if they did end up incarcerated, then this session would have been the escape session. And I had a few ideas planned for that, but they were just in my head. I had police from Inner Triumvirate with spinal control nodes, which was what ended up happening because they made it back to Grevda. So then they were attacked by these police droids who had these spinal control nodes. That's something I completely stole from Red Dwarf, which were implants that they put in the neck that forced the party to do the bidding, and essentially they just use that to make the party kind of tie themselves up and fight each other and stuff, and then inevitably captured by pirates. That was it for the session, and that means it's more the sessions in my head, and these are more sort of things that will jog my memory. If I'm like, what do I do next? Look at that. Now, the problem I always had with doing low prep methods like this is the stats, and quite frankly, ever since I have started, I had this program on my computer that makes stat blocks, like the ones you see in the Monster Box videos, and that's great. But it takes like 10 minutes to make each individual stat block. And the monster manual, great, and I sometimes use monsters like that, but honestly, most of the time, I just think, right, this is a police robot, he's probably got, this much health. And, yeah, he's probably going to do a D8 damage and have a +5 to attack. That's fine. Oh, he has to make a Constitution save. Well, he's a robot. +3. Like, I just make it up as I go, based on what I think he would have. And I think that just works better because that way I'm not putting time into the mechanics and the monsters. I'm putting time into the story. And honestly, when it comes to hit points, occasionally I just won't give them hit points. And the party, if it's meant to be a really challenging encounter, I might just go, okay, I keep track of how much damage the party's done, and then I'll be like, okay, they've done over 100 damage so far to this thing, but I think, they're all still doing quite well, kind of health-wise, and hasn't been too taxing, so I'm going to up its damage a bit, and say it's kind of gone into emergency mode, and, we'll see. And then once, the party are sort of, maybe someone's gone down, or the party's all kind of feeling much more damaged and much more kind of, the combat seems like it's much harder, and has been much harder, then it'll be like, oh, you kill it, yes. So, you don't even need to prepare monster stats. I mean, usually I'll jot, a couple of stats down or something, but I didn't for this. I just, I had some ideas, so I knew that the Space Pirate Captain was going to have 300 hit points. So that he pretty much wouldn't die, because they're too low level to deal that much damage. But I mean, it is possible if they decided to stay and fight. But yeah, so essentially I just want to kind of show off what my prep method is, and how I've been going about doing it recently. And I'll probably do another one of these in not too long, because my prep method changes pretty much week to week. So yeah, thank you for watching, and yeah, happy